Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Das Goswami, Volume 4, In Every Town and Village Around the World, 1968 to 1971. Chapter 32nd, India Dancing White Elephants. So Prabhupada is in Calcutta and his disciples were leading Kirtan and Sankirtan in Calcutta. But then Prabhupada asked them not to do it anymore because Indians were not taking them very Indians are taking them very lightly. From Prabhupada's first day in Calcutta, he had thought of going to Mayapur, the sacred birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, father of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master and pioneer in spreading Lord Chaitanya's teachings beyond India, had longed for the day when Americans and Europeans would join with their Bengali brothers in Mayapur, chanting the holy names. Prabhupada wanted to purchase land, establish a Mayapur center for his Western disciples, and fulfill the dream of his spiritual predecessors. He had written to one of his god brothers, I wish to go to Mayapur to pay my respects to our beloved spiritual master, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, as well as to complete the purchase of the land. So if Jagmohan Prabhu will accompany us to finish this transaction, it will be very kind of him, and I hope you will kindly request him to accompany us. The followers of Lord Chaitanya accept Mayapur, 110 miles north of Calcutta, to be identical with Vrindavan. 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna lived in Vrindavan, performing his childhood pastimes. And 500 years ago, Lord Krishna appeared in Mayapur as Lord Chaitanya. For the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, therefore, Mayapur and Vrindavan are the two most dear and sacred places on earth. What better place for ISKCON to have its world headquarters than in Mayapur? But despite various attempts over the past several years, Srila Prabhupada had still not acquired property there. He had gone to Mayapur with Achyutananda in 1967, seen a plot of land and asked Achyutananda to try and get it. But Achyutananda and the Mohammedan owner had never reached an agreement. Some of Prabhupada's godbrothers had temples and property in Mayapur, but they wouldn't help. Some even seemed to be working against him. When Prabhupada had written one of his godbrothers in Mayapur, asking him to help Achyutananda secure land, the godmother's secretary had replied that he was unable to do so. The secretary had remarked, one must be very fortunate to get land in Mayapur. Prabhupada criticized his godbrother's uncooperative spirit. He was becoming impatient. Why are we not able to get the land in Mayapur? He asked his disciples. This is dragging on for 300 years. Again, he wrote one of his godbrothers. Regarding propagating the name of Sri Mayapur as birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, it is going on regularly in our different literatures and books. If you kindly take the trouble of coming here conveniently, I can show you how we are giving publicity to the birthsite of Lord Chaitanya. Perhaps you know that I begged from His Holiness Shripat Tirth Maharaj a little piece of land at Mayapur for constructing a home for my Western disciples, but he refused the proposal. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted that the American and European devotees would come to Mayapur, and the prophecy is now fulfilled. Unfortunately, they are loitering in the streets of Calcutta without having a suitable place at Mayapur. Do you think it is all right? Accompanied by a small party of men, Prabhupada took the train to Navadvip, just across the Ganga from Mayapur. There they were met by members of the Devanand Mutt. Riding in rickshaws to the Devanand Mutt, the devotees were charmed by the rural atmosphere of Navadvip. Everything was lush from the rainy season, and the devotees found their romantic expectations of India now being fulfilled as they proceeded along roads lined with tropical vegetation. At the Devanand Mutt, Prabhupada and his disciples were given special prasadam and good accommodations. Then the rains returned. Day after day the rains came, and the Ganga rose higher and higher until crossing the swift river into Mayapur became impossible. Since the rains were not likely to abate soon, Prabhupada decided to leave. He and his disciples boarded an early morning train to Calcutta. The tracks were flooded. Repeatedly, the rain had to stop. Once for more than 8 hours. Repeatedly, the train had to stop, I'm sorry. Once for more than 8 hours. The heat and the crowds of passengers constantly passing through the car made the way torturous for the devotees. Prabhupada asked one of his disciples to take a rickshaw and try to arrange better transportation. Nothing was available. At last, the train continued towards Calcutta, only to stop at the next station where all the passengers changed to another train. Finally, Prabhupada reached Calcutta and Mr. Dasgupta's home. Maybe Lord Chaitanya doesn't want us to establish our headquarters in Mayapur, Prabhupada said. The two purposes in his mind, establishing a place in Calcutta and purchasing land in Mayapur, he had not accomplished. Prabhupada continued holding programs in people's homes and talking with guests in his room. One day, Mr. Dandharia visited Prabhupada and mentioned Bombay's upcoming Sadhu Samaj, a gathering of the most important sadhus in India. It was to be held at Chopati Beach and promised to be a big affair. Mr. Dandharia requested Prabhupada to attend, and Prabhupada accepted. Bombay, October 1970. Responding to Srila Prabhupada's request for more disciples to join him in India, a group of 20 American devotees traveled to Brussels and took an inexpensive flight aboard a propeller-driven craft to Bombay. At the airport where the devotees were wondering where they should go, Mr. Kailash Seksaria, a wealthy Bombay businessman and nephew of Mr. Dandharia, approached them with a letter from Prabhupada. Mr. Seksaria had arranged for several cars, and he escorted the devotees to his home in an affluent Bombay residential area on Marine Drive. He fed them and provided them with living quarters. 2 days later, a telegram arrived informing the devotees and their host that Prabhupada would be arriving the next day. Prabhupada arrived at the Bombay airport and after an enthusiastic reception rode with Mr. Seksaria to his home. Marine Drive runs along the seashore and the houses lining it belong to the very rich. Mr. Seksharia's residence was 7 stories and he offered Srila Prabhupada the first floor with its large rooms overlooking the Arabian Sea. Bombay, Prabhupada said, was India's most materialistic city. It was the nation's movie capital and the city where more than in any other Indian city, the people wore Western dresses. The gateway to India, it boasted the most industries, the most businesses, and the most billboards. It was a cosmopolitan melting pot of cultures and religions, but had none of the Naxalite terrorism of Calcutta or the heavy political atmosphere of New Delhi. Nor did it have the aristocratic families who worshipped Lord Chaitanya and his Sankirtan movement. But it had its own advantages for preaching. Prabhupada said it was a city of wealth, with many pious citizens who were intelligent and quick to adopt a good idea. He predicted Bombay would be a favorable city for Krishna consciousness. And yes, sure it is. Prabhupada's first Bombay preaching engagement was at a gathering of sadhus, a pandal in an open field just a few blocks from Mr. Seksharia's home. Prabhupada's disciples had also been invited and they arrived several hours before Prabhupada. The array of Indian sadhus sitting on stage in long rows startled the devotees. Some of the sadhus were bearded, some shaven-headed, some with long matted hair and holding tridents, some covered with ashes, some adorned with beads and clay markings. The devotees were amazed, and many of the sadhus, on seeing the white-skinned Vaishnavas, were also amazed. When the devotees came on stage and began their kirtan, the audience responded by clapping in rhythm and chanting. Afterward, on the advice of Mr. Seksharya, the devotees took the kirtan out into the streets and many in the audience followed. That evening, the devotees returned to the pandal with Prabhupada. Prabhupada sat on a raised platform and his disciples sat at his feet. After having three of his disciples speak in English, Prabhupada spoke in Hindi, while the audience of more than 500 listened silently. After his lecture, he came down from the platform and a crowd gathered around him, touching his feet and following him to his car. When Prabhupada heard from his disciples of the spontaneous kirtan through the streets of Bombay, he said they should go to the busiest bazaars and chant daily. So they did. Wherever large number of people gathered, the devotees would go and chant. They were strong, youthful, exuberant, and faithful. And they would chant in the streets for 3 or 4 hours each day. Although Prabhupada did not physically go into the streets chanting with his disciples, he was with them by his instructions and by his presence before they went out in the morning and when they returned in the evening. They were chanting because he had told them to. And they knew that chanting was a natural activity of the soul. Everyone should chant. The devotees knew that at the end of life, they would go back home, back to God. And better than that, at the end of the day, they would go back to Marine Drive, to Prabhupada, who would smile and encourage them. So devotees did so much for Prabhupada. Radio stations and newspapers took note of the Western devotees chanting in the city. One article appeared in the October 10th edition of the Times of India. A group of Americans, including women with babies in arms, belonging to the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, has been moving around Bombay during the past few days, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Sorry, I was just kicked out. To the accompaniment of cymbals, castanets, and drums. Can the materialistic West, or at any rate a microscopic part of it, have turned at last to embrace a spiritualism of the East? I met several of the Kirtan chanting Americans who have come here to attend the 7th All India Conference at the Bharat Sadhu Samaj, which begins here today. I was at once struck by their sincerity and utter surrender to the cult they have adopted. The Vaishnavas of Mathura could not be so guileless, I thought, as this band of bhakti enthusiasts. The sand of Chapati Beach was fine and clean. The audience numbered in thousands. Sadhus sat on stage, Prabhupada and his followers among them. It was twilight. The sky above the Arabian Sea was cloudy, and a pleasant breeze was stirring. There had already been 2 lectures expounding the Mayavad philosophy, and now it was time for Prabhupada to speak, the last scheduled speaker of the evening. The audience was eager to hear him. His accomplishments in the West had caused great curiosity, especially now that he had arrived in Bombay and his devotees were chanting daily in public. Prabhupada's disciples, bored and exasperated by the preceding 2 hours of Hindi oratory, could scarcely wait any longer for Prabhupada to speak. But Prabhupada, instead of addressing the audience, turned to his disciples and said, "Begin chanting." As soon as the devotees began the kirtan, little Saraswati stood and began to dance. Following her, the other devotees rose and began to dance. As the kirtan came alive with mridangas and kartals, the dancing and chanting of the devotees seemed to disturb some of the sadhus on stage, who rose one by one and left. The audience, however, responded enthusiastically, many of them standing and clapping. After 5 minutes of ecstatic kirtan, the devotees spontaneously jumped down onto the sand and headed towards the audience. Thousands in the crowd rose to their feet and began to move along with devotees in a dance, backward and forward. Indians began crying in uncontrolled happiness, overwhelmed by the genuine Krishna bhakti of these foreigners. Never before had such a thing happened. Policemen and press reporters joined in the chanting and dancing. Chapati Beach was in an uproar of Hare Krishna Kirtan as Prabhupada and his disciples showed the potency of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. After about 10 minutes, the kirtan ended, though a tumultuous unrest pervaded the talkative crowd. 15 minutes elapsed before all the people returned to their seats and the program could continue. The devotees had left the stage and taken their seats on the ground level, leaving Prabhupada alone on stage. Prabhupada's voice echoed over the public address system. Ladies and gentlemen, I was requested to speak in Hindi, but I am not very much accustomed to speak in Hindi. Therefore, the authorities in this meeting have allowed me to speak in English. I hope you will follow me because it is Bombay and most people will be speaking English. The problem is, as this evening's speaker, His Holiness Swami Akhandanandaji spoke to you, how we can make everyone accustomed to take up good habits, sadachar. I think in this age, Kali Yuga, there are many faults. Prabhupada went on to explain the power of Lord Chaitanya's movement to clean the hearts of everyone. He referred to the two great robes whom Lord Chaitanya had delivered, Jagai and Madhai. Now we are saving wholesale Jagais and Madhais. Therefore, if we want peace, if we want to be situated on the Sadachar platform, then we must spread the Harinam Mahamantra all over the world. And it has been practically proven the American and European Vaishnavas who have come here, who have chanted Hare Krishna mantra, the very cow flesh eaters, they were drunkards, they were illicit sex mongers, they were all kinds of gamblers. But having taken to this Krishna consciousness movement, they have given up everything abominable. Sadachar has come automatically. They are no more meat eaters, they are no more gamblers, they are no more illicit sex mongers, and they are no more intoxicators. They do not even take tea. They do not even take coffee. They do not even smoke, which I think it is very rare to be found in India. But they have given up. Why? Because they have taken to this Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada ended his talk after about 5 minutes. I do not feel that I have to say very much. You can see what is the result of Krishna consciousness. It's not something artificial. It's there in everyone. I have not done anything magical. But this Krishna consciousness is present in all of us. We simply have to revive it. The audience responded with cheers and a great round of applause. Prabhupada, with greater force and eloquence than the long-winded Mayavadis, had shown the essence of spiritual life, ecstatic chanting of the holy names, and he had offered the living testimony of his American disciples. For the next week, Prabhupada and his disciples were the talk of Bombay, and they began receiving many invitations to speak and perform kirtan throughout the city. The Times weekly coverage of Sadhu Samaj spotlighted the memorable presence of Prabhupada and his disciples. A group of 20 Americans, members of the Hare Krishna delegation, took over the dais. The air was filled with the beating of mridangas, the clash of cymbals, and the music of the Mahamantra. Swaying from side to side, their tufts of hair tossing in the breeze, they chanted Hare Krishna. One graying reporter, whom I had always regarded as a particularly unsentimental person, said to me in an emotion-choked voice, "Do you realize what is happening? Very soon, Hinduism is going to sweep the West. The Hare Krishna movement will compensate for all our loss at the hands of padres through the centuries." Yes, if Prabhupada was still here, it would have happened. Unfortunately, it has slowed down a lot to the extent that this is not what Prabhupada had in his mind. What has happened is now in America and Europe, Canada, Africa, only in Russia, the locals are joining, but other places, only Indians come to the temples. Hardly any American see. So that's not what Prabhupada wanted. He wanted to preach to the locals. But unfortunately, that's not what is happening. About 25 newsmen came to a press conference on the fifth floor of Mr. Sheksharia's residence. Prabhupada sat with his disciples on a large mattress and answered questions. And the devotees showed a film of the San Francisco Rath Yatra. The reporters asked about New Vrindavan. They questioned the devotees. Why had they become sadhus? Why had they left their country? The next day, the press was full of stories of Prabhupada and his movement. The Times of India picked up on a particular angle. US millionaire's son seeks solace in Krishna's society. So that was actually our Giriraj Maharaj. The article told of Giriraj is that renouncing his father's wealth to join Prabhupada's movement. One newspaper quoted Giriraj, "My father works hard and earns fabulous money. He also fights with my mother. My sisters ran away from the house. Thus, in spite of material comforts, nobody is happy." So actually, Giriraj Maharaj's father was a big lawyer in Chicago. And he was millionaire, he was very, very rich. Quoting Shyam Sundar, "My father is very rich, but he has to take sleeping tablets every night." And then there were articles. Soon letters appeared in the letters column of the Times of India. As far as my knowledge goes, these foreign Hindus of the Hare Krishna movement cannot be equal to the native original Brahmins and Hindus. They will have to be relegated to the lower castes. It is significant to see one of the newly converted sadhus, Sri Gopal Das, formerly Charles Poland of Chicago, stated that he was a construction worker formerly. Doing Shudra's work, it would thus become necessary to allot the three lower castes to these foreign converts, according to their profession. Another letter stated, the Hare Krishna movement is just a sporadic fad of sentimentalists. Prabhupada said these letters should be answered, and he personally outlined replies, delegating their writing to specific disciples. Within a few days, Prabhupada's replies appeared in the press. In India, even amongst the Brahmins in different provinces, there is no social intercourse. So if they are socially accepted or doesn't matter. For example, amongst the qualified legal practitioners in different provinces, there may not be social intercourse, but that does not mean they're not qualified lawyers. This is a cultural movement, and if the whole world accepts this cult, even though Indian Brahmins do not accept it, will do no harm at all. We are not striving for social or political unity. But if Krishna consciousness is accepted, there will be automatically be political, social, and religious unity. The fact that one of our boys was a construction worker does not mean that he belongs to the Shudra community. The Shudra community is a less intelligent class or illiterate class who have no information of the value of life. In America, even the highest cultured and educated person can go to work as an ordinary construction worker because they accept the dignity of labor. So, although a boy was working as a construction worker in America, he's not a Shudra. So, this is what we have in our mind. If somebody has a low status job, then he is Shudra. No. This is what Prabhupada tried to establish. He's not a Shudra just because he has a low status job. But even if he is accepted as Shudra, Lord Krishna says that anyone who comes to him is eligible to be elevated to the highest position of going back to home, back to Godhead. In a letter signed by Giriraj, Prabhupada refuted the charge that his movement was a sporadic fad of sentimentalists. How can our movement be sporadic when this science was taught in the Gita 5,000 years ago and instructed to the sun god millions of years before that? How can it be called sporadic when our activity is Sanatana Dharma, the eternal occupation of the living entity? Would faddists give up all meat eating, intoxicants, illicit sex, and gambling? For over 5 years now, would faddists give up friends, family, and money and get up at 4 a.m. daily, ready to go to any country in the world and preach in any conditions immediately on the request of the spiritual master? Prabhupada saw all news coverage of the Krishna consciousness movement as an aid to propagating Krishna consciousness. Even by criticizing the Krishna consciousness movement, he said the papers were broadcasting the holy name of Krishna, and Krishna's name was absolute. So means it was perfect way of preaching for Prabhupada. Okay, I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhuji.